Hey everyone, David Chen here. Every year at the end of the year, I like to make a top 10 movies of the year list, my favorite films from the year. And every year, I always try to put it out right at the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, and something always gets in the way of that. And this year, I had a little bit of a health issue. That's why I'm wearing a compression sleeve on my left arm. I'm doing a lot better now. Thanks for those who have reached out and expressed concern. If you want to listen to the whole saga, go to culturallyrelevantshow.com. I talk a little bit about it on a recent episode. But we're 3 weeks now into the new year, and I thought, hey, is it even worth making a top 10 movies of 2020 list? And I realized, you know what? I still want to do it. I still want to get this stuff down onto the record, onto my YouTube channel, because it was a rather remarkable year. And there were some great films that were out, and things were weird this year. You know, we didn't have movies open for a lot of the year, and I wanted to just make this video for record keeping. It's not going to be as polished as some of my other videos. I don't have everything written out. I just kind of wanted to riff a little bit about the year, and so I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Let's talk about my top 10 films of 2020. Now, before we get to the top 10 films, I do want to talk about some honorable mentions. These are films that barely missed the top 10 and are nonetheless really quite excellent. Let's start with The Painter and the Thief. This is a really interesting documentary that is on Hulu right now. You can watch it if you're in the US. And it's about a thief that steals a painter's very valued painting and the friendship that ends up forming between the two of them. You'd think that if someone stole something really valuable to you, you'd want to like get revenge or hate that person. But what this movie asks is, what if instead of condemnation, one responded with curiosity, that kind of thing. That's what the painter in this situation does. It's a documentary, it's a real life story, and it manages to capture the dynamic that evolves between these two humans. It's a really touching tale about forgiveness and about understanding and about sympathy and empathy. I'd highly recommend it. It's The Painter and the Thief on Hulu right now. Another honorable mention is Soul, the new Pixar film, co-directed by Kemp Powers and Pete Docter. This movie is great because it actually made me reconsider my life choices. I mean, one of the things that the movie talks about is the fact that one's dreams are not the most important thing in your life. And I know for many of us who have dreams, you think like, oh, I got to achieve this thing. I got to get to this point. I got to advance my career in this way. I got to make this thing. I got to get this praise or get this accolade. One can become so focused on that one forgets about all the other things in life that are wonderful and worth enjoying and worth being content with. And that's one of the things that Soul is trying to remind its viewers about, is that, you know, you can have dreams, you can have aspirations and goals, but don't let them take over your life. And it manages to tell the story in this rather whimsical way with this guy whose like soul goes to the, not the afterlife, but the before life, where people are getting their personalities. It does have some issues with the storytelling. Not a big fan of what Tina Fey does in this film or what her character does in this film. And so that kind of honestly kept it out of the top 10 for me. But everything else about this movie is awesome. It's Soul. It's available right now on Disney+. Another movie in my honorable mentions is this movie called Gunda. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's not available right now on video on demand, or at least not easily, but it will be soon. And I'll just say that it's an interesting look at the lives of animals. The whole thing's like black and white documentary, really beautiful, gorgeous camera movements, capturing animals in their natural environment with no narration or anything. Just watching, you're just observing, you're just kind of being a part of their lives. And I think it's totally fascinating. It's worth checking out. The movie's Gunda, and it'll be available sometime this year on video on demand. Another honorable mention is The 40-Year-Old Version, Rada Blank's movie about making a career for herself as a playwright and as a rapper. This movie's available on Netflix, and I thought it was both hilarious and also an insightful look into what it is like to create art in America today, who controls the money behind art that's being made, and what is one's place in that if one has a unique voice that doesn't necessarily conform to what people's idea of you should be. So I really like this movie. I highly recommend it. I feel like not enough people are watching it or talking about it. I think it should be a big hit. It is 2 hours long and it is in black and white, but trust me, check it out. It's very funny. It's very enjoyable. It's deep. It's moving. It's the 40-year-old version right now on Netflix. And finally, I got to mention Christopher Nolan's Tenet. I've reviewed Tenet. I've talked about Tenet on podcasts. I'll put the links down below if you're interested. But suffice it to say, despite the fact that the movie didn't light the box office on fire this past summer, and there was a lot of controversy around the fact that they're releasing it at all during the pandemic, I think few movies this year really took my breath away in the same way that Tenet did, with its amazing large scope set pieces. Just Christopher Nolan is operating at another level when it comes to the grandness of scale and his ability and knack for capturing everything in camera. Like his action scenes, his big explosions, the things that are happening. I don't even want to describe them, but suffice to say, like a lot of the stuff that happens feels more realistic in Christopher Nolan movies because he's doing a lot of it practically. And sure, the characters are ciphers, and the plot is nearly incomprehensible if you don't have closed captioning turned on. And, you know, it's a hard movie to understand. It's not for everyone, but for me, it was one of the most exhilarating, thrilling experiences I've had watching a movie this year. It reminded me of what it was like to watch Christopher Nolan movies in IMAX. And I'd highly recommend you check it out on home video, specifically on regular Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray. It's a great experience. So that's Tenet. And that is my last honorable mention. All right, let's get to my top 10 movies of 2020. My number 10, maybe a controversial choice, is Hamilton. Hamilton is available right now on Disney+. I know some people don't even consider it a movie because it's a really well-filmed edition of the show. But for me, I mean, I consider it a movie. It was going to be out in theaters before the pandemic. And I understand it's a fairly conservative, like lower C conservative retelling of the country's founding that manages to make a bunch of slaveholders look like badasses. So it's a little bit problematic. But at the same time, for me personally, it expanded my conceptions of what a musical could be. It took me to emotional heights. And there's so much creativity in how a lot of these moments, these scenes were rendered. The cast is obviously excellent. Many of them are ascendant stars today in Hollywood. And so I can't recall a more like kind of musically thrilling experience I've had this year than watching Hamilton on Disney+. Maybe listening to the soundtrack of Tenet, but I really liked it. And despite all the marks against it, I still thought it was a great experience. So that's why Hamilton is my number 10 movie of 2020. Let's talk about my number 9, Borat's subsequent movie film, streaming right now on Prime Video. I'm going to tell you what Borat's subsequent movie film reminded me of. Honestly, the films of Jackie Chan. And what I mean by that is Jackie Chan is a dude who was willing to risk his life for your entertainment. And that is precisely what Sacha Baron Cohen does in this movie. He not only puts himself into situations where he's surrounded by hostile individuals, but much of this film was shot during the pandemic. And he was in situations where there were people without masks on all over the place, who didn't believe in masks. And his satire remains incredibly sharp. He is no longer just assailing America in general as a concept, as he did, I think, in the first Borat film. It's much more sharp. It's much more finely tuned. It's much more against Trump and Pence and all the people who have enabled them to succeed and to thrive and to enact their policies over the course of the last few years. So I thought it was brave, it was bold, and also Maria Bakalova, who plays Borat's daughter, is incredible. I mean, she shows that she has the boldness and the acting chops and the fearlessness of Sacha Baron Cohen. And I mean, you could just make a movie with her, you know, in the future, because everyone recognizes Borat now, but not that many people recognize her. So you could repeat that formula if you wanted to, and it would be, I think, just as funny and interesting. But for me, Borat's subsequent movie film was great, and I really got a nice laugh out of it. And it's one of the few pieces of art that I've consumed this year that was made during the pandemic, that was about the pandemic, that I actually liked. That's why Borat's subsequent movie film is my number 9. It's streaming right now on Prime Video. Number 8, Minari. Now, this movie is not yet out and available for people to watch, so I'll be brief. I'll just say that it's a very simple story about a Korean-American family trying to live out the American dream. And even though I am not Korean, there are so many components of my upbringing that I felt that this movie captured. It captures the profound beauty and loneliness of the immigrant experience in a way that few other films have. I'd highly recommend it. When it comes out in theaters or when it's available for you to watch safely, check out Minari. It is my number 8 film of 2020. Number 7, Small Axe, Mangrove. This is part of the Small Axe series of films by Steve McQueen that are available right now on Prime Video. It's impossible not to compare this movie to another sort of courtroom drama that was released this past year, The Trial of Chicago 7 by Aaron Sorkin. Both movies have similar stories and themes, but Mangrove centers the Black experience, and it feels so much more vital and relevant to our times as a result of that. We live in a country that was roiled by social unrest in 2020 over the treatment of Black people by police. That's very much what Small Axe Mangrove is about. And I think it is essential viewing. It's essential for understanding the history of racial violence, not only in America, but understanding that it takes place around the world. And not only that, it has Steve McQueen's trademark visual flair and his mastery of the camera. I would strongly recommend Small Axe Mangrove, again, streaming right now on Prime Video. It is my number 7. Number 6, Possessor. This is directed by Brandon Cronenberg, and this movie is just a great sci-fi thriller. I mean, the imagery of the film is indelible. You can see, even just from the cover, the poster, like, it's terrifying. Like, you can tell it's going to upset you. But what makes it even more impressive is many of the effects were captured in camera, like practically. Like, they didn't use visual effects or CG. They just figured out a way to capture some of these cool mind-bending light tricks in camera using interesting lenses and things of that nature. And so it makes it feel much more grounded and trippy. But really, at the end of the day, it's nice that, you know, I've seen a lot of movies over the course of my life, and after all that time, it's just nice to be able to watch a movie that can shock you and upset you. And that's certainly what Possessor does, but it does so in a way that is thematically rich and makes you think about the characters and wonder what about the characters in the movie you might be able to relate to. What are the struggles that you share with them? That's what all great art does. That's why Possessor is my number 6 movie of 2020. Let's talk about my number 5 movie, Palm Springs. This movie puts a fresh spin on the Groundhog Day genre of film by making it into a romantic comedy. And I know this is obvious to anyone who's ever thought more than 5 seconds about this, but what I thought is interesting about Palm Springs is, like, you realize that Groundhog Day-esque movies, repeated day movies, they are a metaphor for existence. You know, like, every single day is the same, and we're going through the same motions and the routines for many of us. That has been doubly true during the pandemic. And you are extremely lucky if you have someone to go through that existence with. And that's the thing that Palm Springs brings to life, is the idea that, like, finding someone and making a connection, even if you are in circumstances that never change, can be really profound and beautiful. The movie's also really, really funny. I think Andy Samberg does a great job, and it makes creative use of a limited number of locations and sets. I thought it was a really great experience that managed to capture what it was like to live in quarantine. Palm Springs is streaming right now on Hulu. It's my number 5 movie of 2020. My number 4 movie of the year is The Invisible Man. This was actually the last movie I saw in movie theaters in 2020, I'm pretty sure. And it was a great experience to watch it in movie theater. There's so many jump scares, shocking moments. There's like one shocking moment in this movie. If you've seen it, I think you'll know what it is, that the audience just, like, really got caught up in it because it's so intense. It's, to this moment, probably the most shocking moment out of any movie I've seen in 2020. And what The Invisible Man does is take a classic character and reinvent him for the modern day, but it also has something to say. It is about abusive relationships and gaslighting and who believes who in the aftermath. And I thought Leigh Whannell's script and direction did a great job of bringing this character to life. Elizabeth Moss obviously is crushing it. She's probably delivering one of her best performances of all time in this movie. What's also great is, like, just the creative use of composition. There's so many moments in this movie where you're just looking at negative space. Like, you're just looking at an empty chair and you're, like, wondering, like, is there a dude there? And it makes you feel terror. It makes you feel uncertainty, and it really immerses you in the mindset of the main character. And so for all those reasons, I thought this was a great movie. That's why The Invisible Man is my number 4 of 2020. Number 3 is I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Few filmmakers are able to capture the feeling of dreaming and thinking as well as Charlie Kaufman, and that's certainly what he does in his most recent film, which is available right now on Netflix. Now, I can't really talk about what this film is about without spoiling it. I did make a whole other essay about this movie that you can check out on my channel, and I explain kind of my interpretation of it. So I'd urge you to watch that if you watch the movie. But I can just say that one of the great things about this movie, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, is that it can be interpreted any number of ways. I think that's what makes for great art in general. But for me personally, I found I'm Thinking of Ending Things both compelling and also incredibly, incredibly sad and tragic. And it deeply moved me because of that. And so that's why it's my number 3 film of the year. It's I'm Thinking of Ending Things. You can watch it right now on Netflix. All right, getting to the top 2. My number 2 film of 2020 is Boys State. Boys State is about what's basically like a summer camp in Texas where a bunch of teenage boys try to build a fake representative government. And there's a few things I really like about this film. Number 1 is the cinematography is awesome. I mean, a lot of documentaries are just like talking heads with like recreation shot in slow motion. And I love that format. I love that style. And I really admire a lot of people who are able to make great art that way. But what Boys State does is it manages to capture a lot of real moments in ways that feel very cinematic. Like the cameras they're using use like shallow depth of field. You feel like you're really in these moments with these boys. And it's just rare to see a story that kind of like jump to life that vividly in a documentary as it does in Boys State. But there's also many moments in this movie that I feel are very illuminating about the situation that we're currently living in right now. The boys in Boys State are building a fake government, and you quickly see them do incredibly sketchy, shady things to try to hang on to their votes, to hang on to their power. And they kind of make justifications for themselves, like, you know, there's no, like, I can't do the good things, I can't rule well, I can't pass the good laws if I'm not even in power. So I need to do these terrible things to stay in power. And it really is relevant for what is going on in the United States right now. The idea of people hanging on to power no matter what, doing all kinds of craven, base, incredibly opportunistic things just to hang on to their position. And it makes me ask, like, what is the point of this? Like, if you're selling your soul to do this, like, is this even worth it? And that's kind of what Boys State allows you to witness in microcosm. It allows you to look into the lives of these people, witness them, kind of launch their campaigns and try to claw their way to power, and interpret that however you want about the future of America. Some people watch this movie and they're very optimistic. Some people watch it, they're very pessimistic. But I think it does capture America in a way that few other films have. And so for those reasons, Boys State, streaming right now on Apple TV Plus, is my number 2 film of 2020. My number 1 film of 2020 is Darius Martyr's Sound of Metal. Now, watching this movie reminded me of a very famous quote from Roger Ebert, and I'll just read the quote. He writes, quote, "We are all born with a certain package. We are who we are, where we were born, who we were born as, how we were raised. We're kind of stuck inside that person. And the purpose of civilization and growth is to be able to reach out and empathize a little bit with other people, find out what makes them tick, what they care about. For me, the movies are like a machine that generates empathy. If it's a great movie, it lets you understand a little bit more about what it's like to be a different gender, a different race, a different age, a different economic class, a different nationality, a different profession, different hopes, aspirations, dreams, and fears. It helps us to identify with the people who are sharing this journey with us. And that, to me, is the most noble thing that good movies can do, and it's a reason to encourage them and to support them and to go to them." End quote. To me, Sound of Metal is the movie from 2020 that best captures what Ebert was saying about movies being empathy machines. This is a film that immerses you in the life of Ruben, this character who's played by Riz Ahmed, who struggles when he begins to lose his hearing. And what does that character go through? How does he experience the world? What are the emotions he goes through? What are the choices he needs to make? You are with him in this subjective experience for every step of everything that he's going through. And Riz Ahmed's performance is just incredible. Oscar-worthy, award-worthy. Give him all the awards. Because he can say more with just a furtive and pensive glance than a lot of people can with many, many words. And so I think that Sound of Metal not only took me into a whole other world that I probably don't spend enough time of my life thinking about on a daily basis, but it did so in a way that was moving, that was powerful, made me cry multiple times, and it made me reflect on my own life situation, what I would do in that circumstance, and what my priorities are. So it's one of the most powerful films I've ever seen in my whole life. It's my favorite film of 2020. It is absolutely incredible. If you can see it on Prime Video, you should totally watch Darius Marder's Sound of Metal. I love this movie, and I can't recommend it highly enough. If anyone asks me, what's a movie I should watch, Dave? You talk about movies a lot. Sound of Metal is going to be at the top of my list. Check it out. It is just so, so good. All right, those are my top 10 movies of 2020. I would love to hear what your top 10 movies of 2020 are. Are there any I missed? Are there any that are on your list that you'd recommend to everyone you talk to? Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what your top 10 are. And if you agreed or disagreed with any of my choices, feel free to respectfully let me know. I want to thank all the people over at my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dave Chen. Specifically, I want to thank Chris Iman, Sid Yadav, Steve Austin, Dan Flanagan, Jeff Evans, and Mark C. Warner. Thank you so much for all of your support, for making this YouTube channel possible, for making my podcast Culturally Relevant possible, and all the stuff that I do online possible. And if you want to support me, head on over to patreon.com/Dave Chen. If you enjoyed this video, hit like or subscribe. And thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one.